Everyone's doing well. I hope you all had a wonderful summer break and got a little bit of a break from our CodeX meetings, which are always intense and exciting. And now we're all sort of recharged for a new season of our weekly or bi-weekly CodeX group meetings. And yeah, I hope you've you've been productive in the meantime, and if you have any specific updates for the group, I would suggest that you will put them into the chat. We have our first session in this academic year is with Sabi Anandin, who's the founder and CEO of Paxora. We will just have one presentation today, and so we will just go until 2 o'clock. So Sabi, you have about half an hour. I would suggest that you use about 10 minutes or so, or 10, 15 minutes max, to introduce yourself and the story behind Paxora, and maybe show us a little bit of what you have created, and then leave the rest of the time for conversation with the group. So with that, I will just turn it over to you, Sabi.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Roland. Appreciate you. Just feels like a few weeks ago we caught up. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you again for bringing me to this group. So anyway, I'll start with a little bit of background and context, and then I have about maybe 10 minutes worth of material between presentation and demonstration itself. I'll share both. I'll just say this right off the bat. The call to action really is, I'm a solo founder. I'm building it. I'm building it in a space that I'm not familiar with. You're all the practitioners. You've done this. You've lived this space for many, many years. You're academics, professional experts, and so on and so forth. So any feedback is welcome. That's largely it. So anyway, with that said, my background, I have nothing to do with legal and law. I never studied formal law, none of that. My professional background is engineering, software engineering, and product management. And product management, also building for developers, building developer experiences, tools, platforms as a service, and shipping to enterprise go-to-market motion. Those are all my sweet spot. And what the heck am I doing in the legal space? That's a question that you probably are thinking. This is my personal experience working in the family, or actually having to deal with family law space. And I thought there's something meaningful that I can build and help people out. And that's the reason why I'm here. And I spoke to Roland, and I'm grateful for this opportunity that I get to hang out with you all. So that being said, I have a few slides. I'm going to share my screen and have you all confirm if you can see it. Then we'll go from there. You all see my screen? Any thumbs up? All right, good. Okay, first thing first. I am going to collapse all the Zoom toggle so y'all can see it. So I said this is my personal experience, the space that I'm building in, and it starts with this bigger narrative of about 650,000 Americans go through divorce annually. And I went through divorce as well. And my divorce was uncontested. What that really means is, you all probably understand it. For people who are not familiar with it, it's mutually amicable case, and I would like to consider my case as a happy path. There's nothing happy about someone going through divorce, but it's an easy case. No contesting, no complex property, no children involved, no alimony this, none of that. However, I still paid $27,000. I just do not know why. And also, this is just my side. Right? I don't know how much she paid, probably a few thousand, maybe like 15,000, 20,000, probably it adds up to 50,000, I don't know. At the end of the day, it happened. And also, if I look at, just to give you a spectrum of where this cost lies, from the cost perspective specifically, mine was an uncontested case. I still ended up paying $27,000. It took me 18 months to get divorced. And when I did my research and talked to a bunch of people, things get contested or really high conflict, high valued individuals, it gets really, really cumbersome. It gets really complex, and very quickly, the cost aspect is astronomical even. This is just the cost side. And imagine the type of mental fatigue, the emotional fatigue that someone is going through. Divorce is considered the second rough or toughest thing that someone has to go through in their life's transition. And on top of it, there's the cost, there's financial pressure, there's all these other things that comes along with it. It just is really cumbersome time someone has to navigate. So this is my story. I just sort of gave my personal hook on this one. But what really happened in my case, I just got served. I mean, I think serving is something, I don't know. I mean, like people who are not familiar with these things, I was not. I mean, I'm not in the family domain. I come from India. I don't have very many people go through divorce or like, serving is something like instantly my crisis mode got activated. And I got served as like confused. I was like scared. I'm like mostly alone. I'm also an introvert. I don't have a bigger social fabric so I can reach out and talk to. I was like, what's going on? Should I find help? Should I go and then talk to someone? I did not know what to do. I was like, it took me a few days to even acknowledge this was happening. And then I finally found help. So there's a long story there, but finally I found help after a few days. But then as soon as I found help, everything became so opaque. It became so invisible. I did not know what was happening. It was like many months goes by in this process. On the right side, you have this chart of breakdown of my cost specifically. It looks like this case coordination. This is all from my bills. I did some segmentation. It looks like there's a lot of this coordination that happens between both parties, paralegals talking to each other, attorneys talking to each other. And then there's a lot of exchange, who's blocked on what, and there are filing stipulation here and there. There's just waiting. There's a lot of this back and forth happening. And then there's a lot of paperwork, right? Like every legal chore is ultimately reconciles and converges into a lot of paperwork. And as other things happen, I just realized that, I mean, I just was in a confused state. I did not know what I was doing. I signed up for something, and then I did not get any clarity in this entire process. And I just like kept waiting, waiting, waiting in anxiety. That's largely how my experience was. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it was something that I truly felt. So that's why I'm building Paxora. I I want Paxora to be the support what I wish that I had. What that translates into is how quickly how we can reinforce and how people acknowledge this it really is happening. And it took me a few days to acknowledge that, especially when you don't have a social fabric and circle of people who have gone by. It's also stigma in many countries and cultures, especially from back in India that I come from. You do not know what to expect. And then the whole legal process, what does that even mean? What's involved in this whole process of unpacking divorce? So one is stigma. One, you don't have people that you can help with. How quickly you can get on board, or how quickly you can get the knowledge and the education. You already are emotionally super taxed. If you're like processing this is happening, oh, this is divorce. It's a lot of emotional mental fatigue. And then you have to navigate this whole process on your own. It becomes super cumbersome. And then especially when you have a legal representation, it becomes very cold and transactional. It becomes very business oriented. There's nobody to like really be there next to you or like have that support system around you. So that's one of the primary area where I thought heavily. And eventually that would lead to empowering individuals going through divorce with the knowledge, with the tools, with the process, with the preparedness before even meeting with legal counsel, how quickly we can give them information and prepare them. This is all the process, this is all the steps, this is the timeline. And then do something magical by surprising them. That's how I started embracing. How do I surprise them before they even like lift a finger? How can I invert this whole aspect of transaction that needs to happen so that they can get educated in the process and also all this magic happen downstream? That is the paperwork. And that begins with some situation level, situational awareness of the document that they have in scope. And from that, extracting, populating, and preparing that, you know, autonomously anyway. So with Paxora, I want to reduce the confusion. I want to get rid of it and give clarity to people. So what this really means from a business perspective, and I paid 27,000 just because I couldn't think straight. There's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of unclear. Like every email that I would send, there's always a bill comes with it. There's always this ambiguity and opaqueness, right? Like, I think it's probably common in every law practice. It's all for valid reasons. But then once people get the knowledge and clarity, they get to make decisions clear, I think. I mean, personal experience, not just from this context, but in general context. Once you're calmer, once you're embracing, and once you're acknowledging, and then you're in that realm of clear thinking, you get to think straight and you get to have all this process ironed out in a way. And now once you're in that state of preparedness, and then it also helps with coordinating with other sides of the market and other sides of people involved in the divorce more easily. Both parties are prepared. How many parties are involved are prepared, and then the business transaction happens naturally. This is actually kudos to Roland for pointing me this. So now I was talking from an emotional layer perspective. There is this code and transaction layer, which is all the legal process and proceeds. So he sort of flagged these to me when I was talking to them first time. So I'm trying to bring the emotional and the business transaction layers closer and together in a coherent way possible. So last slide, and then I'll show things in action. So what this really means is I'm building Paxora with this whole emotional business layer happening in some sort of a coherence, as I said. So one client in crisis, I say crisis because I got crisis mode activated when I got served. And Paxora helps with that education, preparedness, and bringing them to a place where they feel comfortable. Somewhat. I mean, it's really hard to say that I'll solve everything. Nobody can. I think when you're in that deep state of fatigue, but Paxora will help get to that level of some clarity and lesser confusion. But then each of those cases, each of that knowledge that Paxora continuously ingests will provide the platform to learn more. And in that process, several specialists will join this common or central source of record, which is all the client data. It could be from the legal law professionals, obviously the paralegals on one side, and then attorneys. And then it could be like when you have a complex property division problem, there's a divorce property division specialist, high net individuals, for example, they'll have a lot of real estate and assets, 401ks. There are like specialists for that. And obviously child support, custody, therapy, all of that just becomes a sub marketplace. They all are reacting and ingesting the same source of record, and everybody's exchanging the context in a coherent way. That's what I'm building. That's how I feel. The learning will compound, the network will grow, and that process, the crisis becomes manageable. That's Paxora, and I'm going to switch focus. And if you guys have any questions in the meantime, I'm happy to answer now.
It doesn't seem like there are any questions just yet, but so let's see what you have, and then we'll
Sounds good.
we'll go to the questions.
All right, that's great. So it's a good segue. So I'm going to open up Paxora. By the way, so just for context, this is currently in closed beta. I have about 80 users who are testing it and giving me a lot of feedback. Once again, the call to action is you guys are all the experts. You are all the professionals. You live and breathe law in general, especially if you're in family law practice. And if you see something, if you say, you want to say something, please do. And if you have any thought of any edge case or gaps that I'm not thinking about, all of your wisdom is welcome. That being said, I'm going to log into Paxora just to walk you through some level of user journeys, the way how I've thought this would help people. This is me thinking as a user largely, and then product manager and engineer afterwards. My goal was to bring that empathy-centered experience to life. And that translates into some neuroplasticity element and thinking about how the mental state of things would be for someone logging in. And in my case, I got served. So what does it really mean? So like, how would I segment those types of scenarios and those translated into these three different categories? One is I got served. What does that mean? There's a lot of technical jargons there, legal jargons there. And then comes the actual question of what do I do next, right? And I have a few demo documents, and obviously, someone can take a snap and then upload that served paper or the paper that they have in a PDF form, things like that. As soon as we upload something like that, and instantly we parse it and give that in a very small bite chunked consumable artifact of what that thing means. And then once they go through this process of understanding, and again from a very someone standing by you and explaining it or reading it. If I felt someone was there next to me when I was reading it, that's how I thought about activating this experience. And then what this really means, there are like specific due dates and so on and so forth. But then what happens next, right? Like this is one part. This is all like the first scratching the surface part. Now you get to the specifications of there is a jurisdiction, there is a family law court, and there is specific details baked in the case. And this is based on Los Angeles. What are the types of splits? What are the types of process that happens within each split? And what are the types of forms that need to get filled? And how to get that papers, sort of progress to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. Finally, what happens when you wait what needs to happen, how you might feel, and things like that. And I was trying to go through that journey. I wish someone gave me this. I never got this in 18 months with my legal team. This is that opaque part that I'm talking about, how quickly we can sort of normalize it and bring this visibility as quickly as possible. And then surprise these users. I mean, the users obviously are in a very stressful state, and it's probably anxious max thinking about all this thing that they are exploring or reading here. But then eventually it dives into like, am I prepared enough to pursue this and file on my own? Or do I need legal representation? Then it becomes a discovery problem. That also takes away the mental fatigue or adds to that mental fatigue. And that's where I want to do furthermore heavy lifting by surprising the users. This is all the forms, just from the one served paper that they uploaded. There's all this denormalize that and get to these forms. These are the 6 or 7 forms that is required for Los Angeles, the specific family code. And we know all this, because we have an ontology of all the courts and the jurisdiction, their rules, their cost splits, their timelines. And this is what I was referring to as Paxora continues to learn and evolve. And then this knowledge grows and compounds on each case. Now you have all this full split of all the documents and explicit guidance on how to fill that. And this all happened just like the fact of them uploading a document, or it can be filled in this type of, whatever we can grab from that document, it's already filled and it's ready to go. And then you get to download that form. So that's all this just first step. Like you are getting educated, you're getting all these forms created and then filled, and these forms are specific to that jurisdiction. That level of matrix manipulation that all has happened using mathematics behind the scenes. Now you have this context. So that's number one. And then I thought about like, okay, so like few other scenarios, right? Like this is like the first step, and I can continue to upload document, that form gets filled more and more, or I can manually edit as a human in the loop part. It could be a scenario where both parties are wanting to file together. In my case, it was a mutual amicable case. I could have just like, did it with my spouse together, ex-wife together. We could have done this together just by uploading our tax return. Tax return is so comprehensive, it can get to about 30–40% of the document as quickly as possible. Same concept, right? If you have a W-2, if you have pay stub, if you have bank statements, savings, you have an aggregate of all that information, everything gets like parsed out correctly. Everything gets like shown in the PDF correctly. And you get to have all that data, and then including the child information, that's all part of your tax return. And you have that data. And if you have like financials, for example, that's when it gets really gnarly. This is where a lot of time spent by the paralegal, at least in my case. How do you parse all these things? How do you populate all these things? If I am uploading a bank statement, how do you then like get all the bank data? If you have multiple bank statements, how do you aggregate in an intelligent way, in a denormalized way? So all that gets populated correctly. And that way your data is now like in one place, one source of truth. You have all the data presented correctly. And that's how I'm thinking about solving this problem, so that folks have to do less while they are already processing the emotional layer. This all crude and boring things should just be boring. It should remain automatic in a black box like manner. And it should just like work out of the box. That's Paxora. That's at a high level how I'm thinking about solving this problem. Eventually what happened, just to paint the picture, and then I'll pause for questions and I'll stop sharing. There's all this marketplace that I was explaining before. So what really happens, like now these users have gone through this form factor and getting educated and being prepared in this process before even reaching out to the legal counsel. Now there's this idea of them solo filing, at least in some of these jurisdictions in the United States, it allows, we can solo file. I did not even know that, first of all. If I had known, I probably would have done it myself or together. But then comes this whole marketplace idea of bringing these specialists into the network, again, on top of the same source of record. And I get to have the paralegals sort of, combed and reconciled based on the shape of the complexity of the problem. Same with the attorneys. And now you have a team. Now you not only have the forms, you already not only have visibility into the whole process, now you have a team, and the forms are ready, and everybody's working on the same thing. And there's no duplicative work. There's no back and forth coordination or weight or unclear things that are happening. Just as transparent and clearer. That's at a high level what Paxora is. With that, I'm going to stop sharing. We have 10 minutes. Please let me know if I can answer any questions.
Cool. Well, thank you, Sabi. It's very cool on so many dimensions. I think the fact that you're trying to give a lot of thought to the user experience of this difficult situation, and then sort of the interaction with the legal system, I think it's very interesting. It would be interesting to see how that applies maybe even to other areas in the law. I know my colleague Margaret Hagan here a couple of years ago, I think worked on a project with Fidelity and trying to make
Mm.
wills and trusts more user-centric. The whole wills and where do you meet the people in this kind of moment when they're, sort of accessible and where they need that information. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities in different areas of the law, family law being one, but probably also others, where we could think about how how the interface, between the legal realities and the human experience
Mhm.
can be improved, and maybe LLM technologies really create new opportunities here. And then just sort of accessing, I've just recently experienced it with my neighbor who's going through a small claims thing, that's just getting that sort of last mile into the even small claims court. It can be daunting, just the amount of forms and overwhelming amount of information on the court's self-help websites is just, even for lawyers, hard to grok.
Mm.
And so I think you've done if you've shown sort of a great way to kind of get to that information, but present it in a way that it's not overwhelming for the individual that has to navigate that. And so I think that's it's really interesting to see. And let me go to some of the questions here, uh, sort of maybe. Well, one of the questions from Cormac
Mhm.
Siegfried, I don't know, is if that's service could be accessible uh, outside of the US too.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was just like thinking about how to answer it. Yeah, initially, I mean, this is all part of my learning path, right, Roland and also Cormac. The idea is I'm thinking, I'm in closed beta right now. I'm going to launch in California state first within the US and then expand to the other states one by one. And yeah, my goal is eventually to expand to, crisis is crisis. And it doesn't, you don't have a different feeling when you're living in New York versus, I don't know, somewhere in Thailand. Everybody has the same problem. They are going through the suffering. They are going through this unclear nature of things. I do want to help people everywhere. So there is that scope that I want to expand. And I think I'll answer the other related question here about jurisdiction in general. Every jurisdiction, even within the US, is different. And same with international, right? Like every part of this legal system has a subtleties here and there. The way I've built the platform, the foundation is a very strict ontology-based, pure deterministic system at this point. And the ontology takes into account a specific jurisdiction, the overall jurisdictions within a state. And that whole matrix of different jurisdictions within the state is codified in that ontology. California has an ontology. New York will have an ontology. Texas will have an ontology. And that whole nuance continues to live and breathe. And it's the knowledge graph that I'm building that continues to evolve incrementally, more and more updates that happen in individual jurisdictions too. Some of these jurisdictions allow e-filing, some of them don't. Some of these forms are consistent within California. Some jurisdictions are different or extra. All those shapes are part of that codified ontology that I have as foundations. So if I were to expand to a different state, it's the same context. I'll just expand another ontology, add for that state, and then it becomes naturally adapted to the platform. Similar to extending and expanding to a different country in a similar realm. But yeah, so there's a lot of nuances. Like I read someone was talking about specific, property division in each in Portland or something like that. I read in Oregon. So there is a lot of that nuances and gotchas. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not an attorney. I'm not practicing law, but I'm trying to come from a point of educating people, giving them the tool in that process, and substantially reduce the cost. And at least from a paperwork standpoint. So as far as if I can accomplish that, the success to me is if someone is like preparing the paperwork, for example, I'm not leading with, hey, I'm going to help you with paperwork. No. First, I'm going to give you the support, give you the education, prepare you. And in a semi-autonomous way, I'm going to prepare all this paperwork that would reduce from several days to few minutes. That's success to me. That's how I'm going to measure how it's activating users, delight.
So Sabi, so moving on to Peter's question, we see he raises like the specter of UPL, which of course a lot of consumer-facing legal tech solutions face. And there was litigation years and years ago against LegalZoom, right? Where, the I think the bar was arguing that, also just selecting, or suggesting to a user, to use one form over another form in incorporation is legal advice, right? And and you're sort of like also presenting all these forms, right? And so that's potentially could be viewed as like legal advice, and it might get you in this UPL territory. And then there are, I think Benjamin answered partially that question already. There are, of course, I think processes in the courts where the courts, I think, are trying to make it more easy for people to represent themselves and make certain filings themselves. And divorce may be just one of those, right? But that's maybe, something, and I'm sure you've already thought about that, but it's something to.
Yeah, that's a good flag. Thank you again for all of both of you to talk about that. Yeah, so UPL is a big deal. I mean, like I've spent so much time with some lawyers, like getting the copy as if it doesn't speak like a referral or an advice.
Yeah.
If I get to a marketplace, it can be treated as like a legal referral, but I'm not an attorney or a law firm. So I need to figure out a different dimension on how do I present that possibility. But Benjamin, yeah, I mean, you're spot on.
I mean, I maybe have like a little bit more experience about this than you do at this point, because I've been working on it for a little bit longer. But the discussion that I had with the Chief Justice from my state was that this was a very badly needed thing, and that the state bar, which is for our state the only state that provides malpractice insurance, would be willing to insure the product if there was at least one supervising attorney. And they have like because of the shortage in the state, like a limited practice licensure that is not a lawyer. So you're not really giving people advice about what to do about their rights or property. You're basically explaining to them what you're basically being a legal educator for them, not so much telling them what to do, right? Because like I shouldn't be telling you you should be divorced or you should not be divorced. I'm just going to tell you that there is a fee for the filing and there's a checkbox here, but like you have to have like the, a decision with a therapist or with a lawyer to make those decisions about why you should make certain decisions, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And then with regards to, you mentioned some stuff about knowledge graphs. So I have about 1/2 of all of the municipalities right now in a vector. Like I use like 3 different sizes of vectors for the vector index. And I'm right now polishing a distributed GraphRag database based off of the interplanetary file system. And I'm about to start doing large scale GraphRag of the entire municipal and state and federal and case law, and making that available this year. And then I met with the Yannick Kilcher, CEO of Deep Judge. I met with him over the summer, and I met with the guy from Extensity AI who does a project called Symbolic AI. And once the GraphRag is done, the goal will be to try to translate some of the stuff into deontic first order logic and try to create like a theorem prover, so that the reinforcement learning aspect of language modeling, you're not just doing next token prediction, you're not just going to get all these hallucinated citations. The idea will be that I can sort of use this theorem prover to provide the loss function to the language model so I can get better reasoning, like the so-called reasoning models on the law itself. I don't know if anyone knows
maybe you
anything
need
about.
to come in sometime and share with this group, as this also sounds very relevant. And if any, I mean, and also on this particular question that Sabi's facing, it seems like already we've solved some problems here, or kind of finding new solutions here. We're pretty much at the end of our time, but we can maybe go just a little bit over. I think hold on. Peter also asked if you used LLMs or real parsers to interpret the service papers.
Yeah. I think so. I spent like the last 2 years working with agentic AI, building enterprise systems with LLMs, really complex, gnarly document processing for healthcare, fintech, all regulated space even. One thing I've learned it the hard way is evaluation, hallucination, blast radius, and especially when it comes to really super sensitive topics such as the healthcare regulated space, like KYC in the finance and fintech world, and obviously in this jurisdiction, more legal centered way. I've learned a lot of lessons, learned a lot of techniques to solve that, and so I intentionally did not use LLM at the runtime. I built it entirely deterministically to the inputs and the outputs in a very math-driven way. So the math cannot lie is my hope. and that way I can deterministically test and continuously evaluate. But then I've codified all this ontology that I've talked about in determinism. That way now the next step is, the logical next step is to have the ensemble of LLMs take all this wealth of codified business rules as process that I have and get to further better classification, get to better accuracy, extraction, data population, and do a lot of evals with LLMs and judges floating around in a random autonomous way. So I can continue to deliver that delight with really high % confidence in what I'm doing. So it's just a matter of me adding that shim. I mean, adding an LLM is the easy part. But when you are dealing with like really sensitive data, regulated data, or legal data, you don't want to mess around with that. You need to have all these guardrails, and I've learned it the hard way. And I've done the hard work first, and now it's the matter of doing the fun element on top of it. I'm excited about it.
Great. So, Sabi, since we're over time already, if you could, there's a few more questions and a few more kudos. I think people really appreciated your presentation. And there were some more questions around privacy and how do you protect that? And someone mentioning that, there's a standardized process in Switzerland where they're making, for 1,500 Swiss francs, this divorce available. But if folks have any specific additional questions, perhaps if you could share your contact information so that people could reach out, and if folks have an interest in continuing the conversation with Sabi, please reach out directly to Sabi. For me, as I said, we have a shorter meeting today because we only had one presentation. So we'll be closing here. But it's been really fun to kick off our group meeting series with you, Sabi. It's a great project and really appreciate you sharing with our group here. And it seems like we already have some next steps here and potential new connections. So I'm excited about that. For you all, I'm excited to have you back. I really love this group. This is like, one of my favorite things and always the best conversations. We have a list of great pre-shows coming up. The next one, I think, will be in 2 weeks from today, except if there's someone else kind of signing up for next week already. But I'll see you at the latest on September 18th. And wonderful to have you all back. Again, thank you, Savi. Round of applause.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of everyone. And please, if you could put your email or something in the chat here, so folks can kind of get that and reach out to you directly if they have more questions. That'd be great.
Yeah, I dropped the email in the chat, but yeah, thank you again, Roland.
Oh, here it is. Okay, great. Okay, well, good to see you all. See you all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.